Well, hello and welcome back to the final exam review series for intermediate algebra. This is Joe Brownlee with Palm Beach State College, and this is question number 6, so let's get to it. Alright, so question number 6 asks us to give the domain and range of the given graph. Now, I took the liberty before we started filming to redraw the graph so that it's a little bit bigger and easier for us to see. So we'll go ahead and put this aside since we have a graph to work with. Now they want the domain and they want the range of this graph. Well, hopefully you'll recall that domain refers to my x values and my range refers to my y values. Now sometimes it's difficult to determine domain and range because you kind of have to use your imagination. You have to visualize a little bit to manipulate this graph in your mind. But I went ahead and sacrificed an old phone cable so that we can more visually see what we're talking about with respect to domain and range. So first things first, let's talk about the domain. So domain, again, refers to my x value. So I'm going to be taking this graph and looking at it with respect to the x-axis. And so if I have this parabola that opens to the left, what I need to visualize is taking this graph and smushing it down so that it becomes flat with the x-axis. And when I do that, I see that there's a definitive spot that it stops. And on this particular graph, I see that it stops, and I can draw a little imaginary barrier here so that I can more easily see. I see that it stops at +3, and it continues going on in this direction, which is my negative values, towards infinity. It keeps going on and on. Remember, these arrows at the end of my graph indicate that it keeps going on and on in this direction forever and ever. It never stops. So if I'm thinking about values in this direction, well, I have -1, -2, -3, -4, so on and so forth. And the further left I go, the smaller my number goes, heading out towards -infinity. So my graph, as far as domain is concerned, is going to be -infinity. And as we said, when I smush my graph against the x-axis, well, where does it stop? The highest this graph will ever get as far as x values on my x-axis is 3. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the way we write these. So we always write it like an ordered pair, so we're going to have -infinity, comma 3. Those are the two that we discussed. And when we are talking about a value that we do not include, meaning we don't, and -infinity is not a real number. We can't pinpoint -infinity on a number line anywhere. And so we have to use a parentheses because it's not really a number. 3, on the other hand, we can find on a number line, and we're saying, yes, this parabola, this graph, is including the number 3, and so we use a bracket. We also know that we're including the number 3 because if we look on our graph on the original practice test, the vertex here is a solid point. So that indicates that we are including 3 as a possible value for x. If, however, the original graph gave me an open circle at my vertex, then I would say my domain is -infinity to 3, but not including 3. Alright? But we're going to go ahead and cross that out because that's not the case for this graph. So my domain, all my x values, it goes to -infinity and stops at +3. Well, what about my y values, my range? Well, again, let's go ahead and take our phone cord And now this time, instead of smushing it to the x-axis, we're going to take each side and we're going to open it up so that it becomes parallel with my y-axis. And again, if we pretend that this phone cord is a line, and we know that my line has arrows on both ends, well then this is really a line going on in that direction, and going on in that direction, up and down. Well, let's talk about the values up and down. Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., going all the way up to positive infinity. And for the values heading down, we have, again, -1, -2, -3, all the way down to negative infinity. And so if I were to take this parabola, stretch it out, well, my y values are going from negative infinity to positive infinity. So the way that we write that, again, since negative infinity and positive infinity are not real numbers, we can't find them on a number line, we have to use our parentheses. And so our range is negative infinity, positive infinity. And generally speaking, we always write the smaller number first and then the larger number second. Well, negative infinity is certainly smaller than positive infinity, and so that's why we put it in negative infinity positive order. And again, negative infinity is smaller than positive 3, and so we write it in smallest to greatest order. All right, so hopefully that was a little more clear. Like I said, sometimes domain and range can be a little difficult to understand because you have to kind of manipulate the graph in your mind. But if you just think of it like a phone cord, and we're going to stretch out our graph to the y-axis and smush it to the x-axis, it might make it a little easier for you. All right, well, that was question number 6. I will see you at question number 7. Again, this is Joe Brownlee. Thank you for watching.